Codependency, taken literally. K-Dog's Movie Review. Together is directed by Michael Shanks and stars Dave Franco and Alison Brie. Years into their relationship, Tim and Millie find themselves at a crossroads as they move to the country. With tensions already flaring, an encounter with an unnatural force threatens to corrupt their lives, their love, and their flesh. Okay, new horror movie out from Neon. I was pretty excited going into this one. It looked weird, obscure, kind of gross with some body horror aspects. So I was looking forward to it greatly. To get right into it, this is a fun horror movie. As a fan of the genre, this is a movie that I would recommend seeing. Now, I say fun in quotations for a very specific reason, which I'll get into. This is a well-crafted film. From the very first scene, you could already tell it was going to be good. A very tense and unsettling opening that involved some dogs really set the stage for what this movie was going to be and really hooked me from the very beginning. The sound design was excellent, the use of music was great, and the camera work too was awesome. From the very beginning, I was hooked. And then we get into the introduction of our characters. As some of you may already know, Dave Franco and Alison Brie are married in real life, and it shows in this movie. They have amazing chemistry. Even when they're bickering and fighting, it's still uncomfortable, but interesting to watch. No spoilers. From the very beginning, we already know that something's a little bit off. This relationship has definitely been around for a long time and is starting to suffer some of those long-term relationship problems. Do these characters really love each other and want to spend their lives together, or is it just complacency? Do they feel comfortable in their own space, or do they just feel too uncomfortable to get out of their current space? And I think both Franco and Brie do a wonderful job at displaying these behaviors and these real life relationship problems. I'll say this, it's believable. You know, you watch some movies about couples and you clearly see that like they just don't like each other, and you never see instances of them actually enjoying being in a relationship. This is not the case here. They obviously have issues that drive the story forward, but there are times when they're very loving to one another and actually enjoy each other's company with smiles and laughs. So that was nice to see in this movie, something that felt authentic. And in addition to that opening scene, I'd say the first and second acts of this movie include some really terrifying imagery and some scare moments that really got to me. There's definitely jump scares in this, but they aren't cheap. They are well crafted and well deserved. I was very unsettled for the first, hour or so of this movie. I was on the edge of my seat during those creepy nighttime scenes. And again, without spoiling anything, we have some creative ideas as well, unique scares that are driving the plot forward. As I said earlier, the sound design is great, something I always love to see, especially in horror films. We have a great mix of practical and CG effects here. I'll consider this a body light horror. There are definitely body horror elements, but it doesn't get too obscene. If you're really into like super gory stuff, you might be disappointed. On the flip end, if you are someone who's very squeamish of gory stuff, I think you can tolerate this movie. There are definitely some kind of gross moments, but it wasn't too bad. So from the very beginning, I was super invested in this movie. I was really invested in these characters, their story, the scares, where this movie was going to go. But then at the end of the second act, or the beginning of the third act, there's a certain scene that occurs, which is not cringy, but like cringe inducing, if that makes sense. Like it's on the verge of being cringy. It involves a bathroom. If you've seen it, you know. I thought, oh, okay, this is a little weird, but I'm still kind of freaked out by the other stuff that's going on. This is like a little silly, but not too silly. So the movie still had me there. But then a couple scenes later, there's a major shift where we go into full camp. The movie basically becomes self-aware and becomes more of a horror comedy. Definitely still horror elements, which I enjoyed, but just a completely different feeling from the first like 70% of this movie. And don't get me wrong, everything is still really done well. the practical makeup, the story, the acting. It's all great. And even the humor that's included with that camp is also great. But it's just different. It's strange. Like, I think if this filmmaker wanted to go in that serious, brooding, dark direction that the first 70% had, I think they could have made a really scary horror film. But with that shift, it became campy, and I left the theater like feeling good and happy. It was just something I wasn't expecting. I don't know if I would consider that a criticism or not, though, because, like I said, both films, and I'm going to say both films because of that tonal shift, both films were really good and had really good elements. And because it was crafted so well, I was still on board for even the camp stuff at the end. I think that's preventing this movie from being like a 9 or a 10 out of 10 for me. And instead, I'm sitting at more like a 7 out of 10. It's still great, and I had a wonderful time with it. It's just expect that tonal shift. If you're more into that dark, brooding character drama type of horror movie, then you might be a little disappointed here because there are some great moments that are set up in the beginning parts of this movie that don't feel like they're fully fleshed out, or I feel like we could have gone further with, but they just go into camp mode instead, which again, I have to stress, it was still really fun and really well made, just different than what the movie was setting up. I think the only other criticism I have with this movie is sometimes I think they show too much. I think in many movies, horror of the unknown is better when you're just hearing a certain sound or just watching a character's reaction to something. Your mind just goes everywhere with what that could be. And so I think, particularly at the very end of the film, and honestly towards the beginning too, where they just show a little too much, keep my imagination flowing with what that horror really could be. But that really is a minor criticism. Overall, I really enjoyed this film. I definitely would recommend it. Just expect that tonal shift. Myself, I'm into the camp stuff and I'm into the dark brooding stuff. And this film was well made enough that I didn't really mind it so much. I was a little surprised, but ultimately I still stuck with the film and I ended up leaving with a smile on my face. Okay, spoiler section, you've been warned. Now, to drive this plot forward, our characters basically fall into this hole, and there is this magical water that the dogs at the beginning of the movie drank, which formed them into this like one coagulated, fucked up creature. I love that. I love that intro. Our two characters then eventually later in the movie fall in this hole and they stumble upon this water. Now, they've been trapped down there for maybe, I don't know, the time sequence is a little jumbled, but maybe like an hour or so. And immediately they're saying, oh, we're so thirsty. And they're in a cave, right? And it's pouring outside. So they can't climb up the side of the cave or they'll slip. So they decide to stay in there overnight. But before that happens, they are so thirsty. And Franco decides to drink from the creepy pool of gross water. Nah. It hasn't been that long, man. Like, you brought water with you. You were drinking it on the way because the water bottle is basically empty when you open it up in the cave. I wouldn't go near that water until I was desperate. He just quickly goes, okay, it's good, and then just keeps drinking it. Especially this is a character who, during that cave sequence, had this monologue about how he was living with a dead rat in his roof and had been inhaling all of these toxic fumes, as he says, over time. So you definitely know that things like that enter his mind when thinking about health. You know, toxic fumes, dead stuff, gross bacterial infections. But you're still going to drink from this like gross pool of water. I know it's to set the story up, and I know that's how we get into the horror stuff, but it just, I don't know, it didn't really work for me. I think they could have come up with a slightly better way of them drinking that water. They do later with Alison Brie when she drinks the water, because I believe it's the neighbor who gives her the infected water. A neighbor that ends up being the coagulation of two people from the church that used to exist there. Now, the scene that went kind of like half camp for me was the sex scene in the bathroom. Nothing wrong with the scene itself. It just having the child walk up and then having them almost be outed by the teacher, Franco not being able to get his dick out of Alison Brie's vagina. That stuff was like veering on comedic for me, but it wasn't quite there just yet. So I was still in this, kind of dark horror mindset. But what really went over the top for me was that first scene where they join together. It's set up really well. They're sleeping in separate bedrooms, but they wake up in the middle of the night and they just can't get away from each other. They slowly start migrating toward each other and they finally connect. And that was really well done. But then we get to the moment where the pills come out. And that's where it just becomes full on camp for me. The way that Franco is yelling about the pills, calling them like diazepam instead of Valium or something. Alison Brie is like, how many do we take? And then Franco's like, all of them. And then he starts like pounding his fists on the ground and saying like, if we snort them, it'll get in us faster. And the whole thing just kind of got silly at that point. And that's where I was like, okay, the bathroom scene plus this, we're in full camp mode. And it definitely was for the rest of the film, with them separating their arms with the electric saw and then like kind of talking about the absurdity of it afterwards. It just became a completely different movie tone wise, which again was really done well and I enjoyed, but it was just different. What did you guys think of Together? Did you like it? Did you hate it? Do you wish it stuck with that brooding dark tone from the first half? Or did you enjoy the camp that followed at the end? Please consider subscribing. It truly means a lot. Till next time.